Welcome to Study Session 3, Forms of Poetry. Introduction. There are endless varieties of human culture which have given rise to different poetic cultures. In this study session, you will learn about 4 major poetic forms. These are 1. Narrative, 2. Satirical, 3. Dramatic, 4. Lyric and ode. Learning outcomes for study session 3. When you have studied this session, you should be able to point out the similarities and differences between the epic and the romance. State the tools and functions of a satire. Identify the 2 ways by which dramatic poetry may be expressed. Highlight the predominant features of lyric poetry. Narrative poetry. A narrative poem tells a tale in verse, and usually from an omniscient point of view. The epic, the romance, and the heroic chants fall under this category. The epic is a very long narrative poem. It is significantly a product of the feudal stage in the historical development of society. Epic poetry is the ultimate, the farthest a poet can go, and the sublime or the hallmark in poetic attainment. Only a negligible number of poets ever attain the mark. The epic celebrates real historic events and the greatness, the heroic achievements, the mores and the civilization of a race or nation, as embodied in a central hero. The destiny of the nation is delicately tied to the fate of the central hero. There are 2 kinds of epic poetry: the oral, primary epic, and the written, secondary epic. The epics of Homer like Odyssey and Iliad, Greek, the Anglo-Saxon, Beowulf, and in Africa, John Pepper Clark, Bec de Ramos Ozidi, Gordon Innes recorded 3 Sunjata versions. The Epic of Sonjara text by Fadigi Sissoko, the Mwindo, Epics of the Baganda recorded by Bill Bukes and Daniel Konine's Chaka are all oral epics. On the other hand, epic poems like John Milton's Paradise Lost and Virgil's Aeneid belong to the tradition of secondary orality because they are written epics. The epic is expressed orally or in written form in highly elevated language and style. A standard secondary epic written usually has 12 books, often subdivided into cantos. On the other hand, an oral epic may take up to 7 days to run through by a minstrel or a traditional griot. The use of epic simile, main source of digression, repetition, etc., is largely responsible for this unusual length or volume of epic poetry. Romance in this context does not have anything to do with lovers necking under some innocuous tree in the dark. Romance is a poetic form that blossomed particularly in the medieval English society. It was generally believed to have originated from ancient Rome. Romance is a poetic tradition that is very close to the epic in form, structure, and topicality. It is also a very long narrative poem, but not as long as epic. Like the epic, romance poetry celebrates the greatness and heroic exploits of a central hero, usually a knight-riding horse. Example, Sir Gawain of the legendary King Arthur's court, or a Christian knight, the Knight of the Red Cross in Edmund Spenser's The Faerie Queene. Romance often does not adopt allegorical approach in its treatment of topicality. Its setting usually alternates between the physical or realistic world and the supernatural world, where the unusual is willed or made to happen. Like the epic, The central hero embarks on a dangerous and long journey in search of greatness. Like his epic counterpart, he encounters difficulties in the course of his journey, at the end of which his society is the better for it. The medieval England's Sir Gawain and the Knight of the Green Castle, and Edmund Spenser's The Faerie Queene, which belong to Romance tradition, shall be given a more detailed attention in this study. Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock, Lord Byron's Don Juan, S.T. Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and quite a good number of modern short poems like Thomas Hardy's At the Drapers or J.P. Clarke's Boc de Remo, Night Rain, all share the narrative poetic form. ITQ, epic, may be primary or secondary. What is the difference between them? ITA, the primary is oral, while the secondary is written. Satirical poetry. Satirical poetries comment on human experience. They lampoon the follies or vices of men by the use of exaggeration, ridicule, sarcasm, irony, and humor for the purpose of reducing the subject to absurdity. A satirical poem criticizes actual life in intelligible poetic structure of varying length. Often they assume a journey motive of similar dimension as those of epic and the English medieval romance. A satirical poem criticizes actual life in intelligible poetic structure of varying length. Often they assume a journey motive of similar dimensions as those of epic and the English medieval romance. A satirical poem may sound acerbic and biting, yet hilarious, witty and elegant, thus compelling the audience to laugh at him or herself. Dramatic poetry. This is a form of poetry that is usually written in dramatic monologue. Monologue, as opposed to dialogue, involves only the poetic voice, personal, presumed to be addressing or responding to someone else unseen. It is done in such a way that only the poetic voice is heard, and through whose address, response, or reaction it is possible for the audience to imagine what the unseen addressee might likely be saying. The drama takes place in the audience's imagination. The dramatic verse was popularized by the English metaphysical poets and other poets like Percy B. Shelley and Lord Byron. We must quickly add, however, that later development has confirmed the possibility of a dramatic verse, having a dramatic situation in which characters engage in a dialogue. Thomas Hardy's At the Drapers is a good example. In contemporary African poetry, dramatic verse form is known to have been popularized by Okot P. Bitek in Song of Lawino, Song of Okor, and Song of Malaya. Other examples include Wole Soyinka's Telephone Conversation and L.S. Senghor's Chaka. More African poets have continued this poetic trend because it readily identifies with indigenous African oral poetry tradition. They include Niyi Osundare, Moon Songs, Okimba Lonko, Ire, and other poems for performance, Tanor Ojaide, and lately Ademola da Silva songs of Odamolugbe. Lyric poetry. These are poems composed with the mind to produce songs or music with relatively fixed form. Lyrics are normally short and between 8 and 100 lines. They usually conform to the rules of music such as beat, meter, rhyme, and rhythm. The ballad, the sonnet, and pastoral poetry strictly belong to the lyrical mode, although the ode may fall under this category too. Its lyricism is largely intrinsic. I shall briefly comment on each. The ballad. It is one of the oldest and simplest lyrics that originate from oral tradition. It is a song narrative which tells a story of heroic exploits or of a commonplace event, expressing basic human emotions such as love, hate, fear, or surprise at physical or supernatural world. Structurally, the melody is made simple by the four-line stanza of iambic verse coupled with interlocking rhyme and a refrain that gives it a dramatic touch. Example: Sir Patrick Spens, Anon. The king sits in Dunfermline town, drinking the blood-red wine, blood red. Oh, where will I get a guide sailor to sail this ship of mine? Up and spark an eldern niche, sat at the king's rich knee, spoke ancient knight right. Sir Patrick Spens is the best sailor that sails upon the sea. The king has written a braid letter and signed it with his hand and sent it to Sir Patrick Spens, was walking on the sand, broad. The first line that Sir Patrick read, a loud locked E, laugh. The next line that Sir Patrick read, the tear blinded is E, I. Oh, what is thee has done this deed? Woo! This ill deed done to me, to send me out this time all the year, to sail upon the sea. Make haste, my merry men. All guide ship sails the morn. Mary, oh say now, say my master dear. Not so, for I fear a deadly storm. Late vestrin, I saw the moon, with old moon in her arm, old, and I fear, my dear master, that will come to harm. Oh, as court nobles were rich late, loth, to wit their cock-heeled shoon, wet shoes, but lang o'er at the play were played, long after, their hearts they swam aboon, above. Oh, lang may their ladies sit, with their fans into their hand. Oh, ere they see Sir Patrick Spens come sailing to the land. Oh, lang may the ladies stand, with their gold combs in their hair, combs, waiting for their own dear lords. Own. For they'll see them, na me, them no more. Half o'er to Abador. It's 50 fathom deep, fathoms, and their lies guide Sir Patrick Spens, good, with the Scots lords at his feet. Sonnet. A sonnet is the most common and the most formal of the lyric poems. Its poetic form, like the ballad, has an imposed pattern. The English sonnet is a more common one. The sonnet is believed to have originated in Italy through Petrarch, 1303 to 1374. This is why the original form is referred to as Italian or Petrarchan sonnet. The Italian sonnet was later introduced to England by Edmund Spenser, who had caused to travel to Italy, where he got fascinated by this novel form of pattern poetry. On his return from Italy, he introduced the Italian sonnet, the English called the new form after Spenser's name. The same sonnet form is referred to as an Italian or Petrarchan or Spenserian sonnet. The latter sonnet, which was largely influenced by the former, was introduced by William Shakespeare. This is why it is often referred to as Shakespearean sonnet. It is also known as Elizabethan or the English sonnet. Both types of sonnet have 14 lines each. However, not every poem with 14 lines qualifies as a sonnet. The Italian sonnet has the first 8 lines called the octave, made up of 2 quatrains, and the last 6 lines called the sestet. The octave, which raises an issue of philosophical magnitude, has a rhyme scheme ABBA, ABBA. The rhyme scheme of the sestet varies from CDC, CDC, or CDE, CDE, to something close to this. The sestet suggests an answer or gives a clue to the issue or question raised in the octave. The Elizabethan or English sonnet does have a different structure, even though it has 14 lines. It has 3 quatrains of not too distinct stanzas of 4 lines each, and a couplet. The couplet has a slight initial indentation. The rhyme scheme is in the following order: the first quatrain A B A B, the second quatrain C D C D, the third quatrain E F E F, and a couplet G G. The Elizabethan sonnet usually has its line arranged in iambic pentameter. We must emphasize, however, that in identifying the rhyme scheme, we must be conscious of the fact that a rhyme may be visual, I rhyme, as we have in the following lines. And if these pleasures may thee move, come live with me and be my love. Note that move and love do not sound the same. M-U-V and L-V. However, the 2 words end with the same order of letters. M, ov, and L, ov. There lies the rhyme. Similarly, a rhyme can be determined purely through a similar sound produced by the end words. This is called audio or air rhyme. For example, and for this I, the king must pluck an eye. Often a rhyme may be determined by words with similar sound and with similar order of letters. This is a perfect rhyme. Example: and then again I have been told, love wounds with heat as death with cold. Upon Westminster Bridge, Williams Wordsworth. Earth has not anything to show more fair. Dull would he be of soul who could pass by, a sight so touching in its majesty. This city now doth like a garment, where the beauty of the morning, silent, bare, sheep, towers, domes, theaters, and temples lie, open unto the fields and to the sky, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air. Never did sun more beautifully steep in its first splendor, valley, rock, or hill. Ne'er saw I, never felt a calm so deep. The river glideth at his own sweet will. Dear God, the very houses seem asleep, and all that mighty earth is lying still. The world is too much with us. Williams Wordsworth. The world is too much with us, late and soon. Getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. This sea that bears our bosom to the moon, the winds that will be howling at all hours, and are upgathered now like sleeping flowers. For this, for everything, we are out of tune. it moves us not. Great God, I'd rather be a pagan suckled in a creed outworn. So might I, standing on this pleasant lea, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn. Have sight of Proteus rising from the sea, or hear old Triton blow his wretched horn. Sonnet 116, William Shakespeare. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when its alteration finds or bends with the remover to remove. Oh, no, it is an ever fixed mark that looks on tempest and it's never shaken. It is the star to every wandering back, whose words unknown, although his height be taken, loves not time's full, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. Holy Sonnet 6, John Donne. Death, be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. Die not, poor death, nor yet canst thou kill me from rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be. Much pleasure then from thee much more must flow, and soonest our best men with thee do go, rest of their bones and souls delivery. Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings and desperate men, and dost with poison, war and sickness dwell, and poppy or charms can make us sleep as well, and better than thy stroke. Why willst thou then? One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die. Pastoral. Originally developed in classical times, pastoral poetry became popularized during the Renaissance and at the end of the 18th century as a reaction against the so-called urban civilization of the neoclassical period. Pastoral poems have identifiable subject matter without a structurally fixed stanzaic form or length. They have elaborate stylized language devices, measured rhythm, and consistent movement of sounds and topicality. Pastoral poems are traditionally and thematically preoccupied with a celebration of the beauty of and abundance in nature. These include a romanticized celebration of fertility, birth, maturity in nature. In other words, pastoral poems celebrate an idealized self-sufficient world of nature and its purity, devoid of decay or pollution or particular interest in the rustic simplicity of the nature-loving and nature-dependent lifestyle of shepherds or shepherdesses. Christopher Marlowe's The Passionate Shepherd to His Love is a good example of poetry in this tradition. Christopher Marlowe's A Passionate Shepherd to His Love. Come live with me and be my love, and we will all the pleasures prove, that hills and valleys, dales and fields, and all the craggy mountain yields. There we will sit upon the rocks, and see the shepherds feed their flocks, by shallow rivers to whose falls melodious birds sings madrigals. And I will make thee beds of roses, with 1,000 fragrant posies, a cap of flowers, and a kettle, embroidered all with leaves of myrtle. A grown made of the finest wool, which from our pretty lambs we pull, fair lined slippers for the cold, with buckles of the purest gold, a belt of straw and ivy birds, with coral clasps and amber studs. And if these pleasures may thee move. Come live with me and be my love. The shepherd swains shall dance and sing for thy delight each May morning. If these delights thy mind may move, then live with me and be my love. Elegy, pastoral elegy. Still in the pastoral tradition is the elegiac poetry. An elegy laments or speculates on death or the loss of a beloved, a protector and a provider, while at the same time expressing fear of insecurity and uncertainty of the future. A good example is the Anglo-Saxon Dios Lament. In tradition Africa, we have Owusu, among others. Another sub-pastoral group is the pastoral elegy. It has a rustic, almost mystical rural setting in which shepherds, nymphs, and gourmets interact in pastoral elegy. Nature joins in the lament. John Milton's Lycidas and Matthew Arnold's Adonais are good examples. Study session summary. The narrative poetry, the satirical poetry, the dramatic poetry, and the lyric and ode are the poetry forms to which you have just been exposed. Here, you learn that the narrative consists of the epic and the romance, and that the satirical poetry uses exaggeration, ridicule, sarcasm, irony, and humor to reduce societal or individual flaws to objects of ridicule. You also learned that the dramatic poetry may be a dramatic monologue or an actual dialogue. Lastly, you learned about the lyric forms, which are primarily devised for musical purposes. End of study session 3. Thank you for listening.